World Cup squads were finalised this week.
That's right.
So yeah, there were some contentious decisions as always, and some interesting omissions. But yeah, I suppose we'll start with Ireland, who named their squad in somewhat ridiculous circumstances over it leaking incorrectly and then leaking correctly, and then having a hodgepodge of an announcement that was not fully the plan.
They had planned to announce it next Sunday, and sort of the position that they have, the place that they've positioned themselves in terms of being anti-journalist seemingly, and anti-press conference and anti-public getting any information, is willfully ignorant as to the context of the modern world, as well as just a little short-sighted and silly.
Well, ultimately ineffective.
I'd say it's been driving Joe Schmidt crazy, because everything has leaked before he's announced it, basically since they've come back from camp.
Yeah, including now the squad.
Yeah, injuries, team sheets, what he's thinking, who's lining up where, and now the World Cup squad. They tried to get out ahead of it, but they were still painfully behind. The reason that we're starting with this is obviously because it is actually and has been the most newsworthy squad selection, because it's generated quite a bit of controversy. The decision to drop Devon Toner, seemingly for South African import John Klein.
Yeah, although strictly speaking, not covering the same position. But yeah, that is the story, and that is the salacious detail of the story as well.
Indeed, it's been sort of a perfect storm of a story for narrative driving. I mean, you have this guy in Dev, who is the guy you would want every professional player in Ireland. You'd want to look up to the guy. He started off, he was sort of lanky, he was skinny, he wasn't an athlete.
Had very poor hands in the first season.
Had very poor hands as well, and was just basically a tall guy, and worked really hard on every aspect of his game and every aspect of his physique, and became a superb player who was a stalwart in the Irish team, always gave 100%, and never let them down on a big occasion. And while he had definitely a poor warm-up run of matches,
sure,
I was under the impression that they would stick with him, and that he's come good on the big occasion before. And even if they're going to go the Ryan and Henderson route with Tyburn to come on afterwards, Dev might not be the worst presence to have in the squad. But as it is, they've gone for a guy who essentially is unproven in an Irish shirt. Munster player Jean Klein, who came from South Africa 3 years ago and has been sort of off the radar as far as being in an Ireland squad, has come in, played a couple of games, including a shellacking at the hands of England, where he was most unimpressive, and has taken Dev's jersey. And it has Augustin Pichot and Luke Fitzgerald, amongst others, have been very, very irked by it. What is your take on it?
Yeah, well, I'm worried about it, for all kinds of rugby related reasons. I think the line out's been pretty shoddy. I think Dev is one guy that I like having there for myriad different reasons. Even at a point I was hearing making, like, if Cronin's going off the bench and he has dodgy throws in him, it's nice to have Dev there with that telepathy from Leinster, but also just the sheer size of the man. But yeah, things like the fact that Jean Klein probably isn't going to see much rugby. He'll probably tog out maybe against Russia and possibly Samoa or something as well. But the fact that that's the case means that, like, who would you rather, if they're going to be tackle bag holders in the squad, who would you rather be there in that capacity? Probably Dev. I disagree with it, but that's, like, I'm not even all that convinced by the tight head lock talk, which is obviously what the justification has been since the opening of the warm-ups. We kind of got a feeling that Klein was going to be on it, because ever since the warm-ups have started, he's been thrust in there with this tight head lock specialty on it. But with that being said, like, if the concern with it is that we're not powerful enough around, or at scrum time specifically, with Dev on the pitch, I've still never seen us bullied in the scrum area.
We have sensational scrummaging props, and Ian Henderson is an extremely hefty bloke, and he did line up a tight head lock at the weekend against Wales, and seemingly ended the careers of Samson Lee and Rob Evans, which we'll get onto. So I don't necessarily buy that chat either, and I just think sort of karmically it doesn't quite feel right to leave Big Dev out, because he's been there forever and he's given them everything, and it feels like quite an ignominious way for that to be the end of a career of a guy that you would want everyone to look up to and everyone admires. Feels a little hollow. The other shock exclusions, well, there were two that weren't necessarily shocking, but they were big calls. It had initially leaked that Will Addison had made the squad. Turns out that's not the case. And he had played very well over the weekend, and likewise Jordy Murphy has been pipped by Rhys Ruddock. But the big news for us, really, I think even the bigger, the bigger snub from a playing point of view is that the form scrum half in the country, Kieran Marmion, isn't in the squad. He didn't make the cut. Two scrum halves went, Luke McGrath and Conor Murray, and that one feels that made me feel a bit uneasy, because while we have seemingly in the last week or so been trying to develop, or at least last week tried to develop a more attacking mindset and bringing a bit of speed and variation to our game, and two big bringers of speed and variation in Will Addison and Marmion, I was hoping would make the plane and haven't. So I think that's a concern.
That is a concern. I think Addison was, upon reflection, like I was thinking that last week as well, but last week they weren't really put up to the same kind of pressure that they will be. For one thing, the Welsh line speed was a bit lax, so it was easier to get things like offloads going, which we did a bit more, but it's still a bit of a hollow test given the opposition. So Addison just hasn't played enough rugby really at fullback. It would have been nice to see him maybe get the nod at the start of the year when Henshaw was getting the nod at 15, but the fact that he
was injured, I think, for
I know,
6 Nations.
and like the fact is he was part of the plan, but he really hasn't played that much, and he's a bit unproven.
It's curious that they would pick him at fullback last week then, when you have such a minute-based deficit for everyone who's backing up Rob Kearney at 15. You have Henshaw played one game and it was a disaster, so he's off. Larmour has had some stuttering performances that were not particularly impressive. And then outside of that, you have no minutes for anybody at 15 in the last
has
year.
Most of them.
Yeah, but since Zebo's gone, it has been Rob and then nobody. And it feels like, it seems to me now that Conway has to be the backup 15.
Well, that's
and he's been playing all of his rugby on the wing.
Oh yeah, but he did play around 20 odd minutes at fullback last week and played very well. I think that the thought process with the selection last week was that it was going to be either Conway or Addison on the plane as covering the same role, basically your fullback come winger kind of job, and Conway outperformed him and has been one of the guys that has shown good form in since the return to play for the World Cup warm-ups, which is something that can't be understated. It's possibly something that contributed to the Dev dropping as well, because I know he had surgery at the end of the season last year and was coming back to it, and did, to be fair, look a little sluggish. You were calling him out on being a bit slow on line-out lifts in the England game.
He was slow on line-out lifts, he was loose on defence. He was very lucky not to be cited at the weekend for a very poor attempt at a tackle with no arms that did end up catching a guy in the head. So that could have factored into it. It
definitely would have, and you see it probably in training as well, which we're not getting to see. You get more of a sense of who's actually coped with the rigours of the pre-season a bit better and who's it suiting, because with a training squad of over 40 or something, and you're all on a regimen that's very fitness heavy and conditioning heavy, you don't fully know who that's going to really work for and who that maybe isn't going to work for and is going to come out of it a bit heavy-legged and a bit kind of just not conditioned right. That's, I think, what's going on with Jordy Murphy, because it was a purely anecdotal little kind of look when they were playing Italy, but I really thought Jordy Murphy looked very frail by his own standards and looked a bit of a shell of himself in the carry and in the contact, and that's probably something to do with it. He just probably didn't condition or get adjusted to the pace of play from that conditioning as soon as all of the Ireland team and camp would have wanted. And when it's so competitive, which is for the first time ever, the 31-man squad is super competitive, and a lot of these guys are unlucky to miss out. But it is the broadly positive news from Ireland's point of view is that for the first World Cup really ever, they're bringing a 31-man squad that's being competitive. They're not bringing a 15-man team that they want to go and try and win the World Cup with. They actually have been focusing 4 years on 31 men, and there are shock exclusions. The one, as you said, that I'm most shocked, I think I can kind of get my head around all three of them of those exclusions, but I can't kind of justify the Marmion one. Just because Conor Murray's form's been so sketchy that we have no speed now, because Luke McGrath, while being a very dogged defender, definitely does have a relationship at club level with both Johnny Sexton and Joey Carberry to fall back on him maybe a bit more than Marmion. Does make his tackles and stuff like that, but he is generally a bit slower than Marmion off the base, and Conor Murray has not looked himself with speed at all, so I just don't know if we mix it up enough with that alternative to Murray.
I definitely agree, and I think it was noticeable when Marmion came off the pitch last week how Ireland slowed down. He has been great. His passing has been great. He has been quicker and more sharp than just about anybody else in the Irish backline, I would go so far as to say. So I'm a bit gutted for him. That said, we could make mugs of ourselves by making too big a deal of it, because Luke McGrath, I've had sort of a love-hate relationship with Luke McGrath.
Yeah, being a Leinster fan.
Yeah, he has been poor at times. He has been frustratingly slow and inaccurate at times.
Yeah.
And then he has games where he's just sensational. But he is a sensational defender. Probably a more consistent box kicker than Marmion, although the box kick seems to have diminished in
the game
in importance from Ireland's point of view.
Yeah.
But when he's at his best attacking wise, we know he can play quick. He has a great Kiwi-like little halfback instinct to run a great inside tracking line.
True. And
gets his fair share of tries from that.
Yeah.
So he could come good. He has a good personality, and I would be confident that if as has happened before, if he has to step up for a 20-minute period in a quarter-final, I would be optimistic about his ability to do so. But I do think we're weaker for the absence of Marmion.
But what it is reflective of is just that Ireland are there with the game plan, and it's the game plan broadly that we've seen over the last
and yet
2
over
to 3
the
years.
last little while, they have tried to bring in a bit more attacking footy. I definitely think Conway is going to be worth his place in the 23.
I would like to
that
see him
level
in
of
14.
form and attacking flair.
Yeah.
I think is important in a team.
Yeah, bolters and the notion of them, like who's grabbing your tries or making your tries in the World Cup year, and not only that, in the World Cup month. Because that's more important. Like, obviously Earls is the incumbent on the right wing, but we haven't seen him yet. You'll probably see him this week. If he's a little stuttery or not up to speed, I would like to see Conway straight in against Scotland at 14 with.
I think he's already got
Stockdale.
the 23 jersey anyway over Larmer. So we'll dig out obviously more into Ireland as we go on, and we'll have a fuller preview of them next week.
But, those were definitely the big talking points. There were a few others, obviously, Sean, but most of them were expected. We had Jack McGrath, who was very much out of the running. Rob Herring as well, which is the right call, I think. As I was concerned that Cronin was falling out of favour, but to leave a guy who's that electric off the squad would have been crazy. So that's not been done as well. So there are positives broadly with it as well. Those are definitely the notable omissions. But I suppose we'll move on to Wales as well, who, like Warren Gatland, always brings a bit of controversy to things like selection as well.
He does.
Definitely no more controversial than Rob Evans and Samson Lee, the two Grand Slam winning front row.
We have on this podcast and on Don's Unbiased Rugby's channels said with some degree of certainty that Rob Evans and Samson Lee would be the prop forwards. They're both gone. They were both sort of retired by Andrew Porter and the Munster scrum before him last week. They did have a very rough time of it. They had a rough time of it against England as well. But shocked I say to not see them in the starting front row, which will leave, I guess, Nicky Smith
and Thomas Francis.
That's
probably the front runner for the title. I was up in the air as to whether Samson Lee was ahead of Thomas Francis anyway, to be honest. Like, he's had a great season.
Thomas Francis is great. I didn't think Samson Lee was necessarily ahead of him. Surprised to see him out of the squad though. And just 2 tight heads. Which I don't know if anyone can switch in there at all. Like, I haven't actually seen enough from those props on either side, but it does seem a bit risky and just a very, very kind of brutal to be cutting those two. Like the other one who was cut, Elias, wasn't it? Leon Brown, who also had a rough time.
He was out last week as well. It seems literally last weekend's showing in Scrum has done for pretty much all of them there.
It has, and it shakes it up. They have not been scrummaging to the level of their Celtic neighbours, Ireland and England, and so to abandon those guys, doubling down in the Exeter scrum could work out for them. It remains to be seen, but it seems very harsh, and my curse finally hit poor Rob Evans.
It wasn't injury at all. It was just getting dropped. That's pretty shocking. But it still leaves. They have obviously Wyn Jones and Reece Carr as well as Elliot D and Ryan Elias. They're still bringing a lot of front rows and a lot of forwards in general.
I think it's 5 props, 3 hookers. Just about everyone else doing that.
The other talking point, it isn't actually someone who missed out, but the fact that all the back rows from their training squad, none of them have been cut. They're bringing all of them.
Most sides brought 5 back rowers. Wales brought the same quantity of everybody else, except they only brought 3 centres instead of a lot of teams bringing 4. And they brought all of their back rows, which just gives you a little insight into how they play the game. They like their back rowers to be caution to the wind, frantic, firing their bodies into tackles and into breakdowns. And so they've 6 men deployed for the task.
A glad attritional kind of game.
Yes,
and,
indeed.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm kind of glad because I was fearful for James Davis making the plane.
He didn't play well at the weekend.
He didn't play all that well, but I see the value in having like an out and out 7 in there as well.
I definitely think there's a drop off from the first. Like if you take Navidi, Tipperick, and Moriarty, and what's in behind them, Wainwright, Davis, and Shingler, isn't as good. And there's a drop off in intensity and power there.
Probably not. And I think the one who they can't afford to lose is Justin Tipperick, because I think he's the out and out world class back row that they have. And the rest are very fine players and do their jobs very, very well and equip themselves well. But he is genuinely world class, so he's one to watch out for.
The other bit of controversy we had mentioned, the centres. Owen Watkin, despite having I think a worse performance than Scott Williams on the day last week, because we billed their shootout.
Yes.
Owen Watkin does get the nod. He is the sort of incumbent squad member.
They seem to prefer him. I don't know, Scott Williams has kind of fallen out of favour over the last 12 to maybe 18 months, I suppose. He's always been the guy there in behind the main guys, and it's just not really happened for him this time. I do agree with you. I thought Watkin was very loose last week. I thought at one point for a break he failed to stick his tackle on Bundy Aki, missed a few other kind of plays passing him by. So I'm surprised, but then it's a point that's being constantly made by a lot of pundits, especially ones who are former players, just the fact that we don't see what goes on in training, and it does have an influence on what all these coaches are doing, especially because the warm-up game, even though playing on the day is very important, these warm-up games are a bit of higgledy-piggledy as far as intensity is concerned. They're a bit more like a training hit-out, so at that, are they more important than the week of training leading up to it, which we're not privy to? Possibly not, because you're going to reveal a lot about where the guys are physically, mentally, and just how sharp they are in terms of that as well in those weeks leading up. So it does seem a bit of a strange decision based on the evidence last week on the pitch, but it was still always a tight call because they're both pretty similar calibre players.
And the other news, which came as no surprise to us, but did seemingly for some other Welshman, Patchell over Jared Evans, who, I mean, the performance that we got last week from those two boys corresponded to our feeling on what that was. I mean, we had heard quite a bit of scepticism vis-a-vis Reece Patchell from Welsh supporters and other supporters in recent weeks, and I've always felt that if given the go in the jersey, Patchell's going to step up, and we saw a sign of that last week when he came off the bench, and I'm glad that they've gone with him. He won't weaken them. No. He can come on and make things happen.
But it's also, it's something I've been saying as well. It's like they lost Anscombe, and the closest like-for-like player they have to Anscombe is Patchell. He's a big guy, big-ish guy who likes to be physical, but take it to the line from 10 and can play 15 as well, and does so for his club. Smooth passing game, can link up very well. For as far as not changing the system, they can bring him in, and if they want to do some games where he starts when you have a bigger to come off the bench and kind of steady the shift for the last 20, that's an option. Similarly, you can do the other way around. You can be open with bigger.
I suspect they'll go for Patchell in the Fiji game, and they might go for bigger again. They go for Patchell against Fiji, Uruguay. Go for bigger against Georgia and Australia.
Maybe something like that. Yeah, no, because they are quite a versatile team, as we've always harped on. They do like to have different ways to play. But Jared Evans, while being quite a lovely, well-rounded 10, he's a bit club level. The Cardiff Blues,
he's certainly not there yet.
They don't control games all that well. They do score some lovely tries, but they tend to be a bit loose in terms of their control, and ultimately the results reflect that. And that Scarlets team, that Scarlets vintage from 2018 that we've always been harping on, which is why it's good to see the likes of James Davis in and Reece Patchell in.
Unfortunate for Steph Evans.
Steph Evans couldn't quite make that cut, but it's that team were quality and gave Wales a bit more of an attacking flair and a bit more width and a bit more speed.
And they came second in the Six Nations that year, which doesn't mean that you should write them off just because this year's iteration won the Grand Slam.
It's true.
There are all sorts of elements of goodness in that Welsh team.
Yeah.
And while there are some shocks in there, it is a good squad overall.
Yeah.
And it'll be curious to see how their scrum holds up.
That's the main concern I have, because those guys who are going now, I thought Carre impressed me a little bit in the bits I've seen of him, but a lot of those props, obviously last week they were destroyed in that area, but they haven't really been solid. Not the same kind of solid that they were in Six Nations, and not kind of what they're looking for from that set piece, because they will be targeted in that area in their pool and in the matches to come. So it's one set piece they really do have to work on. Sure.
Yeah, no question. The Scotland squad is the next one to have been named. Now, actually, I think what I have here is the Rugby Pass leak. I don't think that Gregor Townsend is announcing his until this afternoon. This afternoon being Tuesday. Don't give out to us. So they have, I believe, according to Rugby Pass, left out Hugh Jones, for whom the writing was on the wall. He was an appalling defender and just wasn't doing quite what he needed to do in attack to be there when you had other centres grabbing the jersey. Chris Harris
grabbing tries as well.
Exactly.
So
and then Rory Hutchinson will obviously feel bad as well after grabbing 2 tries at the weekend. Magnus Bradbury, despite a great season in Edinburgh, hasn't quite shown it in a Scotland jersey.
Sure.
Matt Fagerson, the same, not particularly surprising. And then Josh Strauss.
That is surprising to me.
Yeah.
I think they could use Josh Strauss in the wars to come.
Yeah, indeed. He's just another guy as physical as Hamish to help him out in that back row.
Pretty much, yeah. Like he admittedly, he was we were seeing him be tired in the Six Nations, but that's because he was playing and inconsistent. But he was playing more minutes because of that injury crisis that was kind of completely factoring into that team's selection for the whole kind of tournament. Their hand was somewhat forced, so he was starting games at number 8 and playing full 80 minutes against bigger, more physical teams. So we were seeing him get a bit more raggedy. He's definitely a bit old, on the older end of the spectrum as far as their back row options. But as a wily squad member who's kind of been there, done that, has quite a glittering career, has played either hemisphere quite a lot. So we saw the benefit of him. Actually, at the weekend against Georgia, when he came off the bench, he was physical in a surprising way. And so it was strange to see him gone, but in general, Scotland squad very strong, dependent on Finn Russell. Yes, he's still absolutely vital to their chances. But they're in good form. They were impressive last weekend, and they have a fair bit of momentum and confidence going in. So they'll be flying pretty high, because unlike Six Nations, where it felt they were feeling very hard done by and very, very unlucky with the state of affairs with the injuries, they kind of were writing themselves off before the tournament began. That doesn't quite seem to be the case this time. They're pretty confident and pretty buoyant.
Quietly moving on, France named their squad, and theirs came with a healthy dose of shocks as well. Anthony Bellew and Vincent Rattez didn't make it, but that's unsurprising given that they didn't feature. Rattez could feature in the future. You don't know. He could have a glittering French career.
He had a great season, all right, for La Rochelle.
Less so for Bellew. But then the more contentious ones would be Danny Priso, a prop forward who has got quite a bit of game time, is a good scrummager. Didn't quite make it. Roman Taufi Fanua, who...
Unsurprising that.
He was just looked a bit all over the shop.
He looked like a slightly weaker, slightly like as loose version of Van Mahina. Which, given their faith in Van Mahina, means that they're not going to drop him for another one. So unsurprising with him not making it. But the two that did surprise me, like Francois Cros, looked great in the first game against Scotland, and
loads of lovely touches
his hand up
in the open field.
But the main one that I'm shocked by is Felix Lambie, because he really impressed me, and I thought it was one of the finds they had of the Six Nations, not least because I am a self-confessed not a Van Mahina fan. Think that their locks in general are quite loose at times, and quite lazy, quite slow around the corner at times, as just a broad kind of fault on their part. You can see a lot of soft tries conceded around the fringes when there's quick ball. Felix Lambie is one of those guys, a bit more like your Dev Toner, or sorry, like your kind of James Ryan's, Itoji, just guys who keep going.
What I will say for Felix Lambie is that I have noticed him be physically quite deficient at times.
So that's the concern as far as France are concerned, because they want to be a bullying massive presence, which is why they put faith in guys like Van Mahina, even though you can see him take plays off and switch off and get caught out. But even when he's doing that, he's still a big unit, and so is Gabriel Ag, who's lucky to be in there. To be honest, that's probably what spelled doom
but they still only brought 3 locks, including Atoria, who's more of a back rower, so
tugs out at 7 sometimes for them. So
pretty lax French stuff, but there you go. The news there is that there's no Felix Lambie.
Yeah, which I think they could regret. Yeah, because it's just his work ethic that impresses me. Whatever about the lack of physicality, I like the way he moves around the pitch, like the way he puts his body about. And they'll probably be lacking a bit of impetus without him on the plane. Surely.
And Samoan in their squad, no great shocks. All the usual suspects in, some quality players, most notably in the back row and then in the outside backs and centres.
Yeah,
they'll be fun to watch. Tight head Michael Alatoa gets the nod, the Crusaders lad.
Yeah,
who I'm a fan of, and will get to go against his brother this weekend, as we'll talk about in due course.
Yeah.
But yeah, great to see Nana Williams.
Nana Williams back in time is good, and they still have to figure out who their first choice 10 is, but they're bringing both of them anyway. So
yeah, 37-year-old Tusi another headline maker there.
Yeah.
Likewise, Tonga named their squad. Nasi Manu captain, no surprises there. Same boys that were talking out in the Pacific Nations Cup.
Yeah,
hoping to see improvement on them. Namibia 2 named theirs with a 100% Namibian-born flair to them.
Absolutely, yeah, which is very, very good on them.
Good on them.
Yeah, it's good to see that.
Is right, and they have a scrum half, another Yankees, the third halfback Yankees who'll make it to the tournament, who has played with them, I think, in 3 previous World Cups.
Right,
I want to say so.
It's going to be one of the few to make 4. That's
it's
pretty.
I think that's right. Anyway, I'll have to double check that, but. Namibia are raring to go, and I'll be curious to see them in action. And then finally, Georgia, who we obviously love and adore on this podcast, but had a rough time of it last weekend. Obviously, since the injury of Suits Goridza, they've been looking to fill that 7 jersey.
Yes.
And Mamuka Gorgodza has answered the call from retirement.
It's Godzilla back again.
He could, in theory, now have a back row of Giorgadze, Gorgodza, and Gorgadza.
Excellent. It'll make it easier to pronounce the names, because Goridza is something I mess up. I mess it up all the time.
He was vital for them.
He was. It is, like, to be honest now, for, as you were saying off camera, like, for a team in Georgia's position, tier 2 team up against it in the context of their pool, because it really is the pool of death, and losing their star player from the year just gone in their first warm-up game is obviously not ideal. Getting shellacked by Scotland, getting taught a few lessons by Scotland in their home patch was probably useful in the long term, but they now have a couple of weeks to sort stuff out. And bringing a guy like Gorgodza in. Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that, especially for a tier 2 team. You can see a lot of examples in World Cups of big name players for tier 2 teams putting in massive performances.
So these guys won professional trophies. He's played with Montpellier, he's played with Toulon, he's been around the block.
Absolutely.
And it's something that a lot of those guys can look up to and respect, and if for nothing else, his advice is going to be valuable for them.
Yes.
But I do suspect he'll get his game time, and I suspect he'll be good. I hope he'll be good.
Now there is a caveat. Obviously he's been playing for too long, which can negatively impact any player.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
It did for none of his World Cup chances ultimately.
This is it, but I suspect you're right. He will get game time. He will be. He's always a fan favourite, but he's a bit of a hero in that dressing room. I'm sure all the young lads who are playing for that team now, the Lelos, have nothing but reverence and respect for the guy, and how could you not? And he is also a World Cup legend, like some of those highlights from 4 years ago.
Yeah, and
also,
2011 as well.
And 2011 as well. He'd say, I still remember him ragdolling Sean O'Brien in a game against Leinster as well. He's really, really awesome. He's box office as well, so it's good to have him at the World Cup, to be honest, because that was unexpected, and that was rather a good twist on it.
Totally.
Gorgodza back. No way.
I think it was a feel good story.
Yeah. I think that's it then as far as squad news. And definitely just had to open the show with that, because it does inform any of the previews, the upcoming previews that we have to do, because just obviously that is the news stuff of this week. The newsworthy stuff is that the squads are finalised, and really the World Cup's the next thing.
And while we have our controversies and our guys who are very unlucky to miss out, we now have our 31 players per country, and it's time to sort of draw a line under the sand of the talk and the controversy and
spin and such.
Go as we are, and back your team, and assess as we assess, and away we'll go. Be sure to catch our World Cup preview in full next week.
For sure. Thank you very much for watching that video. If you're new here, please like and subscribe down below, and leave a comment as well, because we enjoy the chat and conversation. Thank you.